Welcome back. Today is the 7th of April, 2026, and we are joined by Scott Ritter, a former UN weapons inspector, a U.S. Marine Corps intelligence officer, and also an author. So thank you very much for taking the time.
Thanks for having me.
So it's a bit uncertain at this point after all these tweets coming from Trump, arguing that all a civilization will die tonight. Has he lost his mind, or do you think this is just a form of negotiation tactics? How do you make sense of the recent outburst on Truth Social?
When you have a president threatening the genocide of 90 million people, that can't be construed as rational thought under any circumstance. This is a president who's clearly lost his mind, lost his ability for rational thought, lost his ability to govern. This is a man who's not qualified to hold the office of the President of the United States of America. And if the United States hopes to retain any semblance of legitimacy, constitutionally and in terms of international law, this is a president whose reign of terror must come to an end. This is an illegal war of aggression that's being waged against Iran. Nobody can articulate in cogent fashion anything other than that. Justice Jackson warned us at Nuremberg. He was the prosecutor who put the Nazis on trial, that war of aggression was the ultimate war crime, because from a war crime, the war of aggression, all other war crimes emanated. And now we have the president threatening genocide. This is collective punishment, which is literally a war crime. There's no justification for this whatsoever. And there's the use of terminology by him and his vice president, who has said that there are tools in the toolbox that we have yet to use, tools that would be used to facilitate this civilization-ending strike. The implication is clearly that we have nuclear weapons on the line that can be used. This is a president talking about using nuclear weapons preemptively against a non-nuclear threat, against no threat whatsoever. It's again, the mere thought of using nuclear weapons brings up war crimes. So we have to speak of the distinction. Military planners required to distinguish between civilian and military targets. We know that nuclear weapons do not distinguish. Now, you could make an argument that in the case of nuclear retaliation, it just doesn't matter. But here we're talking about preemptive use of nuclear weapons. Distinction is out the window, a war crime. We're also talking about proportionality. What is Iran doing that could be considered proportional to a nuclear annihilation? And the answer is nothing. The president is upset about Iran's continued stranglehold over the Strait of Hormuz. And he is threatening the entire Iranian nation with annihilation if the Iranian government doesn't relinquish control of the straits. This, again, is collective punishment. The president is threatening genocide. The man is insane, literally insane. He's insane if this is part of a negotiating standard, because no rational person would negotiate using, such language, such positions. And he's insane simply for threatening genocide. And the American people are collectively insane if we allow this to happen. I mean, this is outrageous that people are just going back and forth to work, not doing anything, as if nothing's happening. Where's Congress? We have one member of Congress calling for implementation of the 25th Amendment. Where is the president's cabinet? Where is the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff? I mean, at this point in time, it would be appropriate for somebody to say, Mr. President, you must cease. You are the commander in chief, and your social media postings have the weight of policy behind them, and you're articulating genocide, and we, the uniformed members of the United States military, will never execute orders linked to genocide. So alter this, or we must inform you that we cannot continue to receive and obey and execute orders issued by you. This is where we're at today. This is the scope and scale of the problem and the significance of the threat.
Well, it appears that some of Trump's desperation, though, at least it intensified after this search and rescue mission went wrong, or at least what appears to be a search and rescue mission. I was wondering, how do you make sense of this? Because the U.S. Seems to have taken a lot of losses. Do you have any details what happened during this search and rescue?
I don't have any. I can only go off of informed speculation based upon the limited data that's been made available. Let's just start by noting that the force structure, two MC-130s loaded with Little Bird assault helicopters, is a standard combat search and rescue force structure trained for by the Air Force Special Operations community, together with Army Special Operations Forces. This is not classified. In May of 2023, the U.S. Air Force conducted an operation, I think they called it Agile Chariot, in Wyoming, where they used this exact force structure. They had a downed pilot injured as part of the scenario. Two MC-130s landed on an improvised runway, offloaded MH-6 and AH-6 helicopters, which went out and carried out a combat search and rescue mission, found the pilot, recovered the pilot, came back, and everybody flew off. So for the people out there saying there's no way two MC-130s could ever be involved in something like this, you're wrong, simply wrong. So that's half the problem, is we have people talking about things they just don't know and understand. But here's the twist: the force configuration, who was on board. We had Tier 1 special operations units. We had SEAL Team 6. We had Delta Force. They don't do combat search and rescue. That's just, I mean, they can do it. They're, of course, highly trained and they could do it, but they don't do it. And the other thing is, this package is not a Air Force Special Operations package, CSAR package. This is a Joint Special Operations Task Force. And Joint Special Operations Task Force are formed to carry out specific mission assignments given to them not by the regional commander, but by the National Command Authority. And combat search and rescue is not a mission sent down by the National Command Authority. The other thing is, too, when we look at the composition of it and we look at what the president has talked about, it appears that there was a package on board that had nothing to do with combat search and rescue, but had everything to do with a special mission. And we have other hints about this because ID cards are found by on board belonging to people who have nuclear expertise. And so what we can begin to speculate on in an informed fashion is that when you have Navy SEALs from SEAL Team 6 are specially trained to do nuclear seizure missions. This is part of their mission profile. Delta Force likewise has similar mission capabilities. Delta Force and the U.S. Army also possess specialized explosive ordnance disposal capabilities that are related to breaching facilities, nuclear facilities, in order to gain access to this. The president made reference to equipment used for scaling mountains. No, they had helicopters. They're not scaling mountains. The president, though, gave away a significant aspect. This was equipment that is used to lower yourself into a mountain. I believe that this was a Joint Special Operations Task Force that was given the mission of securing an airfield near Isfahan, and then to carry out a mission of unknown duration, could last hours, could last days, against the southern tunnel complex of Isfahan, where we had identified an air vent, and the job of the SEALs and the EOD was to breach the air vent. Delta was to secure and to gain access to uranium hexafluoride cylinders and recover these cylinders and bring them out. This was the mission. This is what they were configured to do. Now, the question is, therefore, where does this pilot rescue come in? Was this an audible call by the president who, was concerned that they were going to lose this colonel to the enemy, and he went ahead and sacrificed the Isfahan mission? Because the airplanes went in configured for Isfahan. They didn't go in configured for combat search and rescue. They were overloaded, grossly overloaded. And that's one of the reasons why they bogged down on the airfield and were unable to go up. The other thing is the second aircraft may have been damaged by Iranian anti-aircraft fire. There's physical evidence on the remains of the aircraft that suggests this was the case. So that plane may not have been able to take off regardless because of the damage done to it. Again, there's just so much that's unknown about this. But the bottom line is this was a failed mission. They can talk about rescuing a downed pilot, but this was, a failed mission if it was linked to the Isfahan, a tunnel complex and recovering the material inside. The fact that this was being run out of the White House is problematic. It says that there was something else going on. This wasn't just combat search and rescue. This was something else, and that maybe this entire pilot rescue thing was a cover for a larger failed operation that had to be aborted once aircraft got bogged down, once aircraft got damaged. They had to call it off, but we don't know. There's just so much about this that remains unknown. What we do know is that this mission was doomed to fail to begin with. Ask yourself why the Iranians were prepared. The answer is quite obvious. Tulsi Gabbard declared this mission when she told the United States Congress in open session that the intelligence community has a good idea where the Iranian uranium is. Imagine being the Iranians and hearing the director of national intelligence say, we have a good idea. Well, the Iranians know exactly where it is. So they're allowed to presume that if she's right, they need to safeguard it. They need to protect it. Then the Wall Street Journal publishes an article on March 29th that says that the United States is preparing a raid to do this, and the details of the airfield seizure, multiple day operation, again, to go after the uranium that Tulsi Gabbard says we know. And so now the Iranians are able to look outward and say, okay, well, here's an airfield they would have to land at. Here's what they do. And they start defending it. We compromised this mission from the very beginning. I mean, my God, if we were going to do this mission, the job of the director of national intelligence would be to go to Congress and say, we have no idea where the uranium is. We're still looking for it. See, now you get the Iranians to drop their guard. You don't leak your plan to the Wall Street Journal. In fact, what you say is the exact opposite. No, we're not. We're not prepared to do this because we don't know where it is. We wouldn't even know where to begin looking for and conducting a raid. And then you deploy your forces in secret. Instead, when they surged this, you could literally define the composition of a joint special operations task force based upon where forces were surged from. Pope Air Force Base, Hunter Airfield, Fort Bragg, the various locations, Oceana, the various locations where all these special operations capabilities reside are now suddenly surging forward at one time, highly publicized. We gave away this operation. This operation was doomed from the very start. This is one of the most foolhardy things that's ever been attempted. It was never going to succeed because the Iranians were always going to be ready for this. This is just mind-boggling, the entire aspect of this.
Yeah, well, if you put in that context, it does make not sense, but it sheds some light on the recent threats. That is, if this military operation failed, then the alternative would be just to bomb really heavy. I mean, either use nuclear weapons, as you suggested, or use conventional weapons to go after nuclear power plants or bridges, whatever it may be. But if you follow the Israeli media, they have at least one of the channels have a countdown of when 8 p.m. on the 7th of April is reached, which is in a few hours, with a great excitement. How do you think the Israelis are I guess, planning this out? Is this, are they pushing for this massive war, or it seems that they would have some reason to be cautious because if it looks like Iran's going down, they're not going to restrain themselves. I think that's one of the hallmarks of the Iranian strategy, that is to follow this escalation ladder, quite diligently. That is, if the U.S. and Israel takes a step up, they follow. But if one would try to inflict such severe damage on Iran, when we're talking about the death of a civilization, one can imagine the Iranians, hitting back in a very heavy way.
No, you're absolutely right. The Iranians have maintained, escalation control, meaning that there's no hesitation. In the past, the United States and Israel believed they could carry out an action, the Iranians would be hesitant. Um, Here, the Iranians respond decisively. We saw where the United States and Israel struck, primarily Israel struck some chemical plants in Iran the other day. Iran immediately responded by taking out some of the most critical chemical plants in Saudi Arabia, the Sabic plant and others. You know, destroying them, rendering them useless, and in doing so, inflicting huge harm on the global economy. A lot of the resources that we rely, petroleum-based resources, now are not going to be available, and there is no alternative. You know, Sabic is a unique manufacturing capability. We have a Sabic plant right here. I guess it's the biggest Sabic plant in the world today because the one in Saudi Arabia has been taken out of service. But the danger now is that when we get into the erasure of a civilization, how does Iran respond? So far, Iran has not inflicted lethal damage on any nation state. Um, Iran will be in a position to justify itself eliminating all desalinization plants in Israel, all desalinization plants in the Gulf Arab states. And Iran has the capacity to do this. And when that happens, these nation states no longer able to function, no longer able to survive because you need water and there is no alternative water source for the millions of people. And you will see depopulation. The Israelis have the ability to get on boats and airplanes and leave their country. Many of them have passports; they could go live in other nations. But for the Gulf Arabs, where are they going to go? Um, and for the expats that call these so-called bastions of civilization home, what happens when they just turned out to be nothing more than glorified desert outposts? You can't drink the oil. Um, and that's all there's going to be left to drink if the desalinization plants are taken down. So, you know, there are going to be consequences for Donald Trump's actions, and it could be nation-killing consequences. Um, I don't know what Iran's going to do. They've always had a very civilized approach to this, but when faced with existential survival, Iran may have to. And deterrence only works if people are convinced you're gonna pull the trigger. And if the United States does this, then Iran needs to terminate a nation, literally. And I don't mean through nuclear weapons and such, but I mean make it impossible for that nation state to survive. Whether they pick Israel, whether they pick the United Arab Emirates, whether they pick Bahrain, Kuwait, it doesn't matter. But one nation needs to cease to exist so that all nations understand what their fate will be if they continue to be passive in the face of um, America declaring genocide as its official policy.
Yeah, initially I was optimistic about Trump. I thought that a lot of his ideas were organized around the idea of scaling back the empire to save the republic, but he seems to be destroying the republic. He has at least reputational damage to the United States. This is difficult to recover from, but the ramifications are quite global, though. I mean, how do you see? I guess it's hard to measure both the military, the economic, also the political consequence of this. But if you're sitting in Beijing, Moscow, what kind of considerations do you think they're taking into play here? Because Iran is, it's not a nothing country. It's quite an important strategic partner.
Yeah, I mean it's 90 million people. It's not an insignificant country. Tremendous economic potential. You know, Russia and China have taken a very pragmatic stance when it comes to the United States and Donald Trump. But that stance was always predicated on the notion that working with the United States, no matter how difficult, was always the best option as opposed to working against the United States. If Donald Trump follows through, if he uses nuclear weapons, all bets are off. He needs to be treated as a pariah in the United States. He needs to be treated as a pariah. All nations need to cease and desist any relationship with the United States. Americans must be told that they are persona non grata anywhere in the world. American embassies must be shut down. American businesses must be taken over. And Russia and China need to put the United States on notice that, it will treat any American aggression as an existential threat and, confront the United States with the real possibility of thermonuclear war. If the United States uses nuclear weapons against Iran, it means there are no red lines for the United States, none whatsoever. Um, and it becomes a rabid dog, and a rabid dog must be put down. I hate to say it because this is my country, I live here, but this is the reality. We, the people of the United States, can't tolerate this government. We have to, oppose this government with all the powers available to us. And I'm not talking about revolution and going in the streets and that. I'm talking about the power of vote. We must terminate this presidency. Um, we must elect people who are willing to impeach this president and convict this president and everybody who obeys his unlawful orders. We need to put the generals on notice that if you obey these orders, you will be hunted down and held accountable at some point in the future, that there will be no refuge for anybody who articulates support for genocidal policies, for illegal wars of aggression. If we don't do that, then we've lost our status as a sovereign people and a sovereign state. This is an existential moment for the United States of America. We elected a madman, and the question now is, what are we going to do about it?
Well, if the US doesn't go for this option, though, that is, either use nuclear weapons or just seek to destroy everything of energy plants, all of this across Iran, what are the alternatives? Because at the moment, it doesn't. It's unclear what the ground troops can achieve, especially after this failed mission. One would assume that there would be, more apprehension or caution in the Pentagon. But is there any possibilities now opening up the Strait of Hormuz? Any real purpose of ground troops? Or I'm just wondering if Trump is sitting at his desk now with the different options. What is it that he could do?
Nothing. There's nothing he can do. We don't have the force structure capable of doing anything meaningful on the ground. The Marines could take Carg Island, but then they can't hold it because they'll be subjected to bombardment, logistically sustainable. It's not logistically sustainable, and we'll be taking casualties just sitting there getting hit. So that's meaningless. And plus, taking Carg Island won't open up the strait. It'll have no impact on the strait. I think, what we need to do is, Trump needs to take the Iranian proposal and maybe throw a twist. When the Iranians say that, they will operate under safeguards, but they have to be allowed to have uranium. If I were in the United States, I would say, you must give us the deal that you had on the table before we started bombing you. That's our non-negotiable position. In exchange for that, I would also, if I were in the United States, say that we will never pay you reparations directly. But what we will allow is for you to set up a tolling station at the Strait of Hormuz and collect money that'll pay for your repairing your country, but operate it like a New York State throughway post. You're supposed to collect the toll only until you pay off the cost of building the highway, and then the toll booth is supposed to disappear. And I would tell the Iranians, as part of this deal, is that we won't pay you directly, but you can open up this toll booth and you can collect the money needed for reconstruction. The United Nations will agree to an amount of money, and then you will submit a report annually. And when you've received the monies to pay for the reparation, then the Strait of Hormuz will revert from, your control to international control, something of that nature. And then we have to lift sanctions. We have to allow Iran to sell its oil in unfettered fashion, and all that. I think this would be a victory for Iran, and it would provide an off ramp that could be politically acceptable for Trump. He could say, "I have accomplished what nobody has accomplished. I have brought an end to Iran's nuclear weapons potential." Whether the American people will believe this sufficiently to reward him in November is yet to be seen. But there is a diplomatic off ramp. The United States just has to have the courage to take it, the courage and the wisdom.
Yeah, that's the courage and the wisdom, though. But it's not going to come from Trump, I'm feeling. Do you see anything, though? within the U.S., I saw, Taylor Marjorie Greene making the point that, yeah, Trump should essentially seize power now. But is there any significant political forces that are actually pushing back against any of this? Because I mean, I'm seeing across Europe that none of America's allies appear to be raising its voices. But of course, there's concerns in Europe, East Asia, even the Middle East, from allies about how reliable or any security guarantees would be, or the possible threats of making oneself too dependent. But is there any pushback coming, or if not from allies, from adversaries? What do you think?
There's no pushback right now except from Iran. There's no internal pushback of any significance. Yes, there's some outliers. Marjorie Taylor Greene, Ro Khanna, are calling for invocation of the 25th Amendment to remove this man from office. But there's no serious political movement to follow through on that. Um, Europe just doesn't matter anymore. Literally doesn't matter. No one cares what Europe says. The hypocrisy of Europe to call Donald Trump out for his criminal statements while they condone the attack against Russian energy infrastructure is just mind-boggling. But again, Europe's just made itself totally irrelevant. Europe has nothing they can bring to the table, nothing they can offer. Their economy is about to be hit by a tidal wave of energy shortages, and the only solution is the solution that they won't accept, which is returning to Russian energy. And at this juncture, Russia may not. Russia's right now, I don't know if they have the capacity to support Europe, or Russia is busy signing contracts for everybody else in the world, meeting their energy needs now that 22% of the world's energy supplies have been taken off the market. So Europe is irrelevant. Asia, the United States is committing, irreparable harm here. South Korea, Japan are talking about fuel rationing. They are totally dependent upon the Middle East for their, for the bulk of their energy supplies. And there's going to be resentment about the United States, which is not only, failed to protect them, but is responsible for the harm that is, that is striking them at this juncture. You know, this is a disaster for the United States, an absolute disaster. Maybe it's a blessing for the world. Maybe this is what had to happen to allow the world to gather around and ring the bells and sing "Ding Dong, the witch is dead." The Wicked Witch, because we are the Wicked Witch. We are the bad people of the world. I mean, it's something we can laugh at as the analogy, but the fact is, my president has articulated a policy that would make us the greatest genocide nation in the history of the world. No, if we successfully implement this policy, we'll have done worse harm than Nazi Germany, worse harm than Imperial Japan. Um, and as an American, that's just intolerable, intolerable.
If this is, part of a very immoral and dangerous negotiation tactic, what do you think can be actually achieved at this point? Because the Iranians, last I heard, was cease the negotiations given the aggressive rhetoric coming out of Washington. But on the other hand, it appears that Witkoff, Kushner has been taken off, and J.D. Vance, which apparently never wanted this war, will do some of the negotiations. Do you think there's any pathway at all, or are the two sides just simply too far away?
This is where I get in trouble with my Iranian friends, because they point to the people in the streets of Iran who are telling the government, stay the course, finish this thing, do not give in, no ceasefires, no nothing. And that's the passion of a people that is very empowering in terms of their expression of support. But we're dealing with a government that has been trying for decades now to get sanctions lifted, and to bring you know um, you know a better life to the people of Iran. This struggle has created the potential for sanctions to be lifted, for Iran to be allowed to rejoin the family of nations in a full membership capacity. Um, for the Iranian government to deliver to the Iranian people all that has been promised over the course of the past several decades. Um, so how do you get there from where they're at? Um, it's going to require some leadership on the part of Iran. And they need to understand that if they seek to demand too much, no matter how justified it is, I'm not sitting here saying that the Iranians are not justified to pursue victory that benefits them the best, given all that they've sacrificed and that they're on the right side of history. But sometimes you can get a Pyrrhic victory. The price you pay for your victory is too high. At some point in time, if Iran doesn't find a formula that will be acceptable to the United States will move on making Iran disappear. That's just that we're never going to surrender to Iran. And this is where the Iranian government has to come in and be smart, to find a solution that brings an end to this conflict, that allows sanctions to be lifted, allows Iran's economy to be fully engaged, but also gives America a dignified exit. This is about politics right now, and so there will have to be some compromise on the part of Iranians if they want to turn this victory into something that's meaningful. I mean, they can fight to the end and claim victory, but if the price of victory is the absolute devastation and destruction of your nation, that's literally the definition of what a Pyrrhic victory is. I don't think Iran is looking for a Pyrrhic victory. I think they're looking for a termination of the situation that has existed for the past 5 decades, where the United States is seeking hegemonic domination over a region that includes Iran.
Yeah. No, I tend to agree with that sentiment. I think if the victory would be too great, either the United States, as suggested now by Trump, or Israel could reach for a nuclear weapon, or just do whatever it takes to destroy Iran. But that's why this is a critical point, it seems, because up until now, there would be a possibility, I think, to get some kind of a deal. But if Trump moves forward with this, it seems to be all over, though, isn't it? I mean, if it is not a nuclear weapon this time, if they, I will say, just go after its nuclear power plants, destroy this with the nuclear fallout, the bridges, all of this. I mean, if this is the only thing they're going after, it's going to be very hard for Iran, when all of this has been destroyed, to actually turn around and agree to anything.
I mean, yes, of course. But people need to understand that infrastructure can be rebuilt. The Chinese are very good at it. And I do believe that if this conflict ends, that China will play a very important role in the reconstruction of Iran. Russia will play a role too. Yeah, the concern is energy infrastructure, how much damage is done there. Because even if you lift sanctions and allow Iran to plug back in, if they're not able to produce the energy, they're going to have, they're going to be challenged. And the longer Iran waits to get plugged back in, the more the market is going to be, taken up by others. Russia, to name one. And Russia is a good friend and a good ally, but I don't think Russia, is the kind of friend that gives away half their paycheck. So Iran needs to be realistic here about about what they can achieve. I know that they're very angry. I know that they have righteousness on their side, but they also need to be realistic about what can be achieved. The strategic defeat of the United States is an impossibility because we're a nuclear armed nation. And we will use nuclear weapons before we allow ourselves to collapse. So if Iran's seeking to collapse America, no. We already have seen that Iran has made it impossible for American forces to remain in Qatar. They've said they're shutting down the Al Udeid Air Base and America's presence there. What other nations will follow suit? Can the United States afford to come back and reconstitute its footprint in the Middle East? And what policies will a heavy military footprint favor? So there's a lot of unknowns out there that need to be better defined. But bringing an end to this conflict, while Iran can still function as a member of the international community, should be the goal and objective of every Iranian politician.
Well, one goal which you mentioned earlier would be perhaps seizing Karg Island. I heard, um, uh, what was his name? General, oh God, my mind's empty now. General Keith Kellogg, sorry, he was yeah, he was making the point that at a minimum the U.S. should seize Karg Island, and either his idea of holding Karg Island with the energy facilities, or just destroying everything which is there. Do you think either of those two could be one of the main options? Because if this is shut down, uh, that's a huge chunk of Iran's economy.
Well, the Iranians have said they'll simply, you know, it's a place that's used right now to, you know, transfer oil onto tankers and such. But uh, Iran can easily build, again with Chinese assistance, they can make Bandar Abbas, that port, Chabahar. They can build a new port totally dedicated. Losing Karg Island doesn't end everything. It's a matter of convenience. But um, but again, that just shows how the United States becomes singularly focused on issues that haven't been well thought out. Um, the physical occupation of Karg, of course, can be accomplished. That's what the Marine Corps does. Um, we have 2 battalion landing teams. There's no doubt in my mind that these battalion landing teams would be able to secure a foothold ashore, fight their way through, and occupy the island. Then what? First of all, it could be a great cost. The Iranians are underground in tunnels. It could be a nightmare to dig them out, but we'll dig them out because we're Marines. But now we have to hold an island, and the Iranian mainland is just right there. They have missiles and drones, so they'll just keep coming in, keep coming in, keep coming in, keep coming in. And at some point in time, we'll have to leave Karg Island. And what will you have achieved? Nothing. Um, so I'm hoping that the president is now going to be informed by his cabinet and such that they can't support this kind of operation. That there's no military reason for this operation.
Just my last question, though, is on Israel, because they seem to have been a key driving force, well, incentivizing Trump to go forth with this. Do you think they might play a larger role if the U.S. would now go for this, complete destruction of Iran?
If we take this route, we're doing the Israeli plan. This is what the Israelis want. This is what they've wanted all along. And so Israel will, be cheering on the sidelines. But the Israelis aren't, confronting the reality that it's over for Israel. Um, Back in September of 2023, Benjamin Netanyahu, upon hearing Joe Biden the announcement in New Delhi during the G20 meeting about the intent to create the India, Middle East, European Economic Corridor. And Netanyahu came out and said, this is the most important day in modern Israeli history. People have forgotten about this. The most important day in modern Israeli history. Why? Because the fact is, Israel is a dysfunctional state until it can become an economic superpower in the region. And this corridor was going to position Israel to be just that. This corridor was seen as an extension of the policies of the Abraham Accord. And again, the idea is for the Arab nations to recognize Israel, do business with Israel, and establish business partnerships where Israel would have a lead role. This would have made Israel legitimate in the eyes of the regional countries, and therefore a player in the overall global climate of humanity. That's done. There will be no India, Middle East economic corridor. Israel is being destroyed as we speak. Who's going to pay for Israeli reconstruction? And if they take it to the next level, we're going to see a population suddenly drop by 2, 3, 4 million as people flee because there's no water to sustain life. Israel still has political clout here at home, but the fact is, Israel has suffered such damage because of this conflict, the conflict that they started, the conflict that they have, defined the scope and scale of. Um, you know, you know, Israel has suffered huge damage that is irrecoverable. Who's going to pay for their reconstruction? Not the United States. Um, and how are they going to survive? Their economy is already in tatters. You know, no one's going to do business with them. I think this is the end of Israel as we as a modern Jewish homeland. I don't think that is a sustainable model anymore, and this will be one of the great victories of all times. But it'll be a victory of Iran over Israel.
Yeah, it's always dangerous when countries, will face this kind of existential threats. But just sorry, one last question. Final last question. What do we know so far, though, about the damages that have been inflicted upon Israel? Because we don't get a lot of information out of Israel.
Again, we don't know a lot. We do know that photographs keep being taken of missiles hitting targets, even after the Israelis say the missiles were intercepted. Um, but the proof will be in the pudding. What is Israel's economic performance right now? What contracts are they engaged in? Where are they earning money? And the answer is they're not. Israel isn't open for business right now. The businesses don't function normally. They can't function normally, being under continuous bombardment from the West. Israel is literally, they invented the, short-term pain for long-term gain. That seems to be the Israeli approach right now. But the pain that they're suffering was something the Israelis always worried about. They in June they said we have to stop because we're taking too much pain and we don't have an identifiable off ramp because the United States did not join in. Now they have the United States in. This is actually a political victory for Benjamin Netanyahu to get President Trump to do what no other president was willing to do, and that is to join in a concerted, military-driven plan to eliminate the theocracy. So the Israelis have what they wanted, but it's not going the way they wanted. The United States is incapable of sealing the deal on victory, and Israel lacks the capacity to achieve victory unilaterally. And now we have a situation where the United States is looking for an off ramp. What happens if the United States accepts an off ramp but says we can't control Israel? That's between Iran and Israel, and now Israel's on its own with the Iranians continuing to pound them on a daily basis. How long can Israel survive? What will Israel look like? This time next year, will it be the same grotesquely enlarged parasite that it is, or will the Israelis have reverted back to their 1968 borders, or and learn to live in peace with their Palestinian neighbors? The bottom line is Israel is the fundamental problem, and unless the solution to this conflict includes a viable solution to limit Israel's ability to project power aggressively against their neighbors, it's hard to talk about peace terms that would be acceptable to Iran.
Yeah. Well, thank you for taking the time, and I guess in a few hours we'll find out what to make of Trump's quite vulgar and aggressive